Anthony Fasano here from the Engineering Management Institute. I'm here in Philadelphia. I'm about to head into the offices of Pannoni to talk with Joe Viscuso. We're going to talk to Joe about smart cities. What are smart cities and what do we as engineers need to know about them? Come on, let's do it. Anthony Fasano from the Engineering Management Institute, and I'm excited to be here at the offices of Pannoni with Joe Viscuso, Director of Strategic Growth. Joe, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
So before we get into the topic of smart cities and technology a little bit, let's just talk about you for a minute. Maybe you can introduce yourself in terms of your career journey and the areas you focused in.
Okay. Out of college, civil engineer, became a project manager in a small local firm. Started my own firm in 1979, a firm called Brandywine Valley Engineers. Started with a partner, grew that to over a 20-year period to with 50 employees in a couple locations. Did an acquisition back then. I've always been involved in the merger and acquisition field also. Then I merged my firm with a firm in New York, Vollmer Associates, in 1997. Put the two firms together. The funny thing about that was I had 50 employees, they had 300, and I was laughed at how I was going to survive in a large firm like that. And when you say that today, it sounds kind of archaic that 350 people in a firm was large.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
It's very small by some of today's standards, really. But that was my thought process back then. Became a partner in that firm. We grew that through both organic and acquisitions to about 650 people, and then we sold that firm to Stantec. Joined Stantec in 2007 and was the director of, kind of had a strategic growth initiative for them also in the retail commercial sector. Spent 5 years with them, and I really, at the end of that period, moved over to Pannoni in 2012 to take on this role of director of strategic growth, because I really do like. I'm a top line person. I've always been a top line person.
Sure.
I don't get. Although obviously very important, when I had my own firm, you have to worry about the bottom line. You always worry about the bottom line. But I've always been a top line person. My feeling in this business was that if the funnel was filled and the top line was always growing, that you really wouldn't worry too much about the bottom line. It would take care of itself. So that's kind of been my thing over the years. So.
That's great. And if before you got to your title of strategic growth, it seems that there's just a theme of growth in your career, right? You started your own business, you grew it. You went with Vollmer, you grew that firm.
Right.
Come to Pannoni, focused on strategic growth. So that's exciting to me because that's energy, right? When you're growing something, it's exciting. And so let's get into this a little bit. I know you spend a lot of time traveling to different cities, different venues to talk about innovation, look into different technologies. Why is that important to the future of firms in our field?
Well, I think that the technology is growing faster today. It's growing exponentially, right? Even back to going back to when I had my own firm, right, and the introduction of CAD. If you think about that, right? And that was like 1986, and explaining to the engineers in our firm that we were going to go to automated drafting, CAD, and people saying that'll never work, that'll never happen. Engineers always have a tendency, I think because we're engineers, we have a tendency to push back on technology, even though we're early adopters and early innovators. It's always like, well, that can't happen, that'll never happen, you can never do this, right? And so even when you think about that, and again, you think about it today and you say, how would life be in engineering, in any profession of engineering without CAD? Right, I think that even that early technology, to me, almost seems like the dinosaur age when you think about it, and it was crawling back then.
Yeah.
But today, technology is, when I say exponential, it's exponential.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
And so, for the engineering professionals listening to this, yes, we know technology is evolving rapidly. And it's critically important. You have to innovate as firms, as even as individuals. But how is that really going to change the everyday landscape of the engineering profession? Like, how will people actually see it in action?
So, common analogy that I've been using, we talk a lot about, when you peel the onion back, right, to a project. A project will always be a project when you get to the project. But working with your clients, working with agencies, however, when to get to the core of that onion, using technologies that we've never used before, it's kind of where I see the change is happening. So for example, we do a lot of municipal work here at Panoni. We do a lot of road programs. For years and years, a road program was there have been sophisticated techniques out there with LiDAR and other things for doing road analysis, pavement analysis, I should say.
Sure.
Doing pavement analysis. But small municipal clients could never afford that type of technology. It was saved for your DOTs and some of your higher agencies that had the money to spend. But a small municipality was not going to use that kind of technology. There's technologies today out there that using artificial intelligence, nothing but an Android phone, to do the analysis of, to do pavement analysis, very affordable, right? So you're gathering this data differently. The previous way to do pavement analysis was very subjective. It was eyes on the road, the civil engineer going around to all the roads, looking at them, trying to make an analysis visually of road A being worse than road B, or being better than road C or D or E, right? So very subjective analysis, because if you do that over a 2-3 day period, you may be doing half the municipality, I may be doing the other half.
Right.
Your analysis is different than my analysis, right? So very subjective, right? When you start to bring in this analysis using artificial intelligence that doesn't take very long, I can do an entire municipality in 4 hours, right? Using this technology. Now it's very objective. The Android phone and the artificial intelligence has done the analysis that we used to do. At the end of the day, now I've got the data. Now I'm to the core of the onion. Now I've got it. Now it's a project, right? So I'm going to do the project the same way I would have done it in the past. But now I've got a lot more data, a lot more analytics, and a lot more information, objective information, to explain to my client why we're doing these roads, why this road is more important than that road, right? And so at the core of the onion, there's still the same project. We're still going to put a program out to bid to resurface a certain amount of roads, or rehab a certain amount of roads. But how I got to the core of that onion was much different. And I think that's what you're going to see, is the techniques that we're using are going to be much, much different than techniques in the past.
That's interesting. What I like about that is that you still need the professional engineer to look at the data, come up with scenarios and options for the clients, express that to the clients, present that to the clients. So you're not removing them completely, but you're giving them tools to give you more data, better data, quicker data, which is great, because at the end of the day, like Joe says, a project is a project. You've got a budget, you've got a scope, you've got a schedule, you've got some constraints. But the way we navigate those constraints and those different aspects of the project can change dramatically. And can make it easier, can make it faster, and really can get better tools available to municipalities, like you said, that used to be cost prohibitive because of the innovation and how it's evolving. So let's jump into smart cities. That's really wanted to come and talk to you about. You've done a lot of research on this. You've been all over the place on this. Before we jump into it, for those watching or listening that don't know what a smart city is at all, can you just break it down for us to start?
Well, I mean, smart cities, it's a term you hear everywhere really today, right? Every city wants to quote be smart, right? And as I said, a few months ago when I was somewhere, there's an opposite to smart. Right, and you don't want to be the opposite to it, right? And we were joking that the politically correct term is challenge. So we won't. So if you're not smart, you're going to be challenged. But I think that the most kind of what is a smart city? Smart city is a city or a municipality. So we shouldn't limit ourselves to cities, because it's any municipal government, right? There's certainly a lot of the USA is made up, or the world is made up of a lot of smaller municipal entities that are not quote cities. So it's any municipal government. But the idea is that the citizenry and we were involved with a big worldwide study last year, which we can talk about in a little bit. But the citizenry is really residents, businesses, the stakeholders in a city are expecting things, quote, today to be smart, right? There's apps for everything,
Right.
that we do out there, and so it's a city that's using technology to its advantage to improve things like mobility. Things like payment systems within the city, parking systems within the city,
Yep.
trash collection within the city, lighting and energy use within the city. It's using the technologies that I just talked to you a few minutes ago about, right, to the advantage of its stakeholders, and the stakeholders expect it.
Right.
And so, if you're not going to be smart, if you're not known to be using those technologies, businesses, people are not going to live in the cities, and so therefore, the cities that have the smart nomenclature are going to attract the best and the brightest, whether it's residents or whether it's businesses, and it's really an economic development. I see it more as an economic development play today, and the cities that don't embrace it are going to be challenged, and it goes even back to firms, right? Firms that embrace the technology will attract the best and the brightest. Firms that don't embrace the technology, the employees will shy away from, right?
Yeah.
And so you really you have to be. I've been talking a lot, about if you roll back in time, go back to like the Industrial Revolution, right? And kind of what the Industrial Revolution brought to the development of a lot of cities in the U.S. But the Industrial Revolution took place over decades. The death of the Industrial Revolution took place over decades, and people didn't see it coming. So a city like a Pittsburgh, for example, that was completely wrapped around the steel industry, and didn't see that was changing.
Right.
Right. They died a slow death. You won't die a slow death in the technological revolution.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not happening in decades. It's happening in months,
It's happening
years,
very quickly.
right? So the death will be very quickly. Firms will, same thing with engineering firms, I believe, that don't embrace the technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that analogy because we deal a lot with coaching and training, and companies are constantly coming to us saying, right now our biggest challenge is recruiting, right? Trying to find people. There's a lot of work out there. And to your point, you can almost look at this idea of a smart city and say cities that are innovative and smart are going to be more pleasurable places to live, really, and exist, because it's convenient, it's efficient. The same goes for companies. Companies that are on the cutting edge with technology, young, up-and-coming engineers looking to be in a cutting-edge, innovative company are going to go work there, and going to have a good experience. So that's a really good analogy. So if you had a crystal ball, Joe, what would you see about the future? Thinking big picture, the future of these smart cities.
Well, I think what the next wave is going to be the rollout of 5G. I was just at a conference at NJIT. Our company president, Tony Bartolomeo, and myself were on one of the panels for a whole day wrapped around 5G, right? So 5G will be the next big thing. I've heard one of the things I heard that I thought that was very insightful was 4G came out, right? And again, we just forget how fast things are going, right? Yeah. But we all remember dial-up modems, right? Moving data in a dial-up modem, right? And listening to that tone to know we had to connect, you had the connection, or sending a fax. And that seems so archaic today. Yeah. We're talking, that was less than 10 years ago. Yeah. The iPhone didn't exist more than 20 years ago, right? So we just I think we're so caught up in the technology we don't see it moving so fast. But the next wave will be the rollout of 5G. All the companies that are in that space, the Verizons, the Comcast, the T-Mobiles that are in that space are all laying at the groundwork for the 5G network, right? And one of the things I heard at the NJIT conference, which I thought was very insightful, was when 4G came out, there were companies that couldn't have existed prior. Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft could not have existed without a 4G, right? So companies got invented with nothing more than the technology of moving data faster. Right? What will 5G allow us to do? 5G will allow us to move data even faster.
Making
these
the city
these
smarter.
these podcasts will stream,
Yeah.
at this. I don't say the speed of light because
Right.
it's even faster now, right?
Yeah.
So they'll make cities even smarter, right? And so the cities that have the that are embracing the 5G and assisting companies with the rollout of 5G will be smarter, faster.
Right.
And but so the thing that I heard I thought was very insightful was what companies are going to be invented that we don't even know about,
Right.
wrapped
With
around
the
5G
5G. That's
technology,
interesting.
right? And again, it's even exponentially bigger than 4G was like tremendous, hooray, this is unbelievable. Well, 5G will be 10 times even more tremendous, hooray, this is really
And we'll
great.
bring up more opportunities with it.
That we don't even know what they'll be.
Right.
We don't even know what they'll be. But the one thing I hear over and over again, just to stay on this because again, as engineering firms, we're attached to this, right? We understand the issue that a city issuing, and again, I don't like the term. I really want to come back to municipal governments. Municipal governments issuing RFPs that we respond to,
Right.
and what that looks like from our perspective, right? It takes them months and months and months to develop an RFP.
Right.
It takes them months and months to get it on the street. Then it takes several months for firms to respond to it. Then it takes several months for contracts to be let.
That's
Then
a
it
long
takes
cycle.
several months for years for the project to be developed, right?
Right.
In the smart world, one of the things I hear over and over and over again from the cities themselves is the procurement system. The procurement system has got to change at they are saying that's a big issue for them because the technology is moving faster than the system.
Oh.
You can't wait months and months and years for these projects to
Right.
happen because the technology will have passed it by, right? So one of the things that all the cities are struggling with is the procurement. So you say, if I had a crystal ball, that's one thing that even the cities recognize is their biggest issue that they have in the smart space.
So you see them putting energy and effort into upgrading that process or
It's got to change.
shortening it. Has to shorten
Yeah,
the process.
Yeah. It's got to change somehow, some way. Even as I said to you with that conference that I was at with NJIT, the Comcast of the world and the T-Mobiles and the Verizons that are in that space pushing it out.
Right.
They're saying that's the biggest issue we have. Permitting, regulation.
Right.
Trying to make it happen because the technology
Right.
is
I mean,
moving
the
too
technology to get the projects done is going faster, but
Right.
the process to get to that is crawling.
Right.
So the two
Right.
don't match up.
And crawling's a good word because again, it may not seem like it's like, well, it's okay. We can take 6 months to do this. We can take a year to do that. We can take 2 years to do it.
Right.
You really can't.
It's only because we're used to it, probably.
Right.
It's become normal.
Right.
All right. So along those lines, Joe, if you had a magic wand and you could help to move the smart cities along or increase the momentum around smart cities, what might you do?
Procurement would definitely be one of them.
Okay.
No doubt about it because that's the biggest impediment to the municipal side of things. The other thing would be though is I alluded earlier to the study that we were just involved with. eConsult here in Philadelphia just did a worldwide study of 135 cities around the world in terms of where are cities in their cities around the world, literally around the world, were put into 3 categories. They were either a beginner city, a transitioning city, or a leader city in the smart city movement.
That's interesting.
Okay, and the idea was that when you really when you look at that, even a leader city will always be transitioning. And always be a beginner in some technology, but there are cities that are way out in front of the smart movement. There are cities that are transitioning into it, and there are cities that haven't begun their journey yet. And one of the interesting things to come out of the analysis of that study, because citizens were not only were cities questioned in the in the surveys that were put out, but businesses were surveyed and residents were surveyed, right, as all the stakeholders. And there's a kind of a spreadsheet inside the study that shows kind of where cities think where they think their priorities are,
Right.
where the businesses say their priorities are, and where the residents say their priorities are, right, and they're not on the same page. So really, municipal governments have to understand that they could be spending millions of dollars on something that is not important to their stakeholders.
That's interesting, and that's another analogy, at least for us, is sometimes when we go into engineering firms to do training, the first thing we do is we survey all the employees and we survey all the leadership.
Right.
The two don't match up.
Don't match up.
And that's exactly what you're saying. A city's going to go ahead and invest millions and millions of dollars in becoming smarter, but are they investing in the right areas of that the people who live there really need?
Right.
And so there's that connection that has to be made for sure,
right.
Which is interesting. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. We know that, we hear threats about that. How about related to smart cities? How does it protect against it? Does it ever open us up to it? Just talk about cybersecurity in general.
A good topic, right? Because it again is one of the issues that is front and foremost in everybody's mind. And as we said in, you look at a city like Atlanta, for example.
Sure.
They were hacked. Okay, how did they get hacked? They got hacked through what we call a back door, right? They got hacked through an HVAC contractor putting controls in buildings that allowed it opened up a back door into their systems, right? So when we think about cybersecurity, one of the things we talk about all the time, and by the way, that was part of the Smarter Cities 2025 study around that, is that we as this technology grows, cybersecurity becomes a bigger threat, right? Because there's more and more doors that are opened up into the technology that a city has. Plus, one of the other big problems with cities is they're very siloed. The buildings department doesn't talk to the health department. The health department doesn't talk to the police department. Police department doesn't talk to the fire department. Right. So they're very siloed in the cities, and those silos also create areas of potential threat. And again, taking it back to our business, right? There are engineering firms that have been opened up to hacks where their data has been captured and they've been held ransom to have to pay a ransom, right, for it. So you look at a firm like ours and our IT director, we talk about this all the time. We back up our data every 15 minutes. Did we back up our data every 15 minutes 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? No, but we do it today. Why do we do it today? Because if we do get hacked, right, and somebody does call for a ransom, we just say, thanks, but no thanks. We got our data from 15 minutes ago. We're good with that, right? So even firms, and I think cities are doing the same thing, and businesses are doing the same thing, because cybersecurity is becoming such a threat. But the more doors that we open up, right, the more of I tell this, everything we look at. Go back to your house. What in your house is smart today that wasn't before? My washing machine my washer is connected. My refrigerator is connected. My car is connected. Right. All the appliances in your house are now connected. Well, they are backdoor opportunities for somebody to get into your own home that didn't exist before. And I always tell this. I was telling the story. We just rescued a cat. Okay, where are you going with this, Joe? With that cat being smart, right? We just rescued a cat. And my wife brings home used to be back in the day, there was a wind-up mouse that you would put on the floor. You'd wind it up, put it on the floor, and the cat would chase the mouse around. My wife goes on Amazon. She and again, you can talk about Amazon as a company and wrapped around the whole technology. But she orders online, and what do I have to do? I have to put an app on her phone to control the mouse, right, for the cat to chase the mouse. So that app is another. And
you could be probably in another country.
Who knows?
The smart mouse for your cat at home, right?
Who knows where this mouse came from, right? What country it came from?
Right. Oh, right. What's in there in terms of potential threats? What's
in there in terms of potential threats, right? Because it probably wasn't made in America, right? And we have to think about it, that these countries that are out there.
I'm always thinking about it because I just got a new iPhone because I went to the store and my camera wasn't working. So they're like, listen, it's going to cost you more to fix the camera. Just get the newest version, right? So then the other day, my wife is like, give me your phone, and she's trying to talk to the Siri. I'm like, I didn't turn it on yet. I'm still nervous because I've used it in the past, but now you're hearing all this stuff like Siri's listening to you, and you start getting ads and stuff. And again, I don't know how true that is, but so I still haven't turned it on yet. But again, That's annoying because like today I'm trying to get directions and you want to just say, Siri, show me how to get to Pannoni, you know?
Right.
So it's a balance. I mean, listen, with everything good, there's bad, there's potential threats. And so, like you said, there's a lot of positives, like it can help these departments to sync up quicker and better. But if they're not, it also presents a threat. So I would assume it's just something that we have to deal with if we want to, you know, maximize and utilize smart cities. And it's just going to be another focus in it.
We're not going to look. The technology has got it's on a path of its own, right? We've got too many smart people in this world developing the technology, working on the technology, and I think if you look at just autonomous vehicles,
right?
How's that going to change a city?
Yeah.
Right. The city of Jacksonville right now has an RFP out to look at all of their transit stations in terms of if we're looking at our transit stations, we have to be aware that 5 years, no more than 10 years out, autonomous vehicles will be there. And how's that going to change the way that people will drive around the city of Philadelphia, right? You hear a lot of conversation now about parking garages. Are they going to be necessary? How do we repurpose parking garages? Because autonomous vehicles will, they're not going to, in the best world, they're going to be ride share. They're going to be electric. They're going to have to be electric.
Right.
All autonomous vehicles will be electric. And if I were to go here to any engineering firm and talk about autonomous vehicles, there's going to be a contingency of engineers. It's never happened. Guys, go back to CAD, never happened.
Yeah.
Autonomous vehicles is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Because there's too many smart people in the world developing all the technology to make them happen. And again, the engineer will say, well, geez, yes, but in the intersection, the intersections that we design, it can't happen because of this, it can't happen because of that. Guys, we won't be designing the car to the intersection. We'll be designing the intersection to the car.
Right.
So everything that you've designed in the past is going to have to be redesigned, rethought, repurposed, restructured around the autonomous vehicle, right? And so to be a naysayer to say it'll never happen is just being foolish. You're going to be left behind.
And your company is going to be left behind.
Your company,
like we talked about before.
Exactly right.
So, what are some of the barriers, Joe, for a city to become or adopt some smart city measures and become a smart city? Because I'm sure there are barriers or challenges.
I've mentioned probably already, right? Some of the barriers are the procurement system, definitely a barrier. Cybersecurity, definitely a barrier. The siloing of the departments in the city, a barrier, right? So there's a number of things that are out there, and again, the infrastructure. The infrastructure is there's going to have to be a thought process of the infrastructure around mobility. Because mobility is going to be, when we don't even use the word, in the smart space, we don't even use the word transportation systems. We use the word mobility, right? Because mobility means a whole lot, it's a whole lot different in the smart discussion than it is in the traditional transportation system. So mobility, you look at a city like San Diego, right? There, scooters and bikes and ride sharing and all of the things around mobility that are going to be totally different in the smart space.
That's interesting. So this is kind of a question I think we can run another analogy on. You have a smart city or residents in a city that want it to be smart or smarter, right? And you also have engineers that work in an engineering company that they want to be more innovative and not so left in the dust, so to speak. What are these residents or employees, what kind of conversations can they have with these entities to move these innovative processes along? If they have, what can they do?
Well, I think that it's like I said before, if you're not adopting the technologies, you're not going to attract the businesses and the people.
Right.
And I think it's going to be I don't even think there's going to be I think cities are not even going to, if they're not forward thinking and having the conversations, then people are just going to look to other places. And that's where they're going to gravitate to. We already know where we know what cities are being innovative and forward thinking, and we have a lot of conversation about the different generations. The implication at this conference was that because I'm a boomer, I don't get it. Well, I do get it. I mean, and maybe I'm certainly, there's a lot of folks in my generation that aren't to the technology point that they should be, right? But I expect certain things to happen off an app on my phone, right? The same way that a Gen Xer or a millennial might. And I think it is changing the mindset of everything that we do, right? From how we move around and how we do things and the expectations. I mean, what do I have on my phone? I know I can get the weather on my phone. I know I can call an Uber, on my phone or Lyft, right?
What can you do on your phone?
What can I do on my? It's where my schedule is, and in terms of finding things and emails, and I live off my phone, right?
Of course. Everybody
so
else,
if I was a survivalist. The one thing I definitely have to have is the internet and my phone. And you could put me wherever you want to be, but I'll survive. I'll figure out how to eat something and cook something and everything else. But I always tell the story. I said like I had a heart attack many years ago. It's been, my health's been great for 20 years, and I was young when I had it. And I had BlackBerry. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Now that sounds like something that you would have used in the Stone Ages, right? So I remember saying I said, "Where's my BlackBerry?" When I was like with it and back in my hospital bed. Well, they said you shouldn't have it. I said, if you want me to have another heart attack, take away my BlackBerry. Right, so bring me my BlackBerry so I can survive.
I know, you're right. People are so reliant on these things.
Yeah.
It's like second nature. Like, where is it? You're looking for it. It's there automatically.
But I think there's lines in the sand drawn that the Gen Xers only do this, and the millennials only do this, and the boomers only do that, and the Gen Ys do that. And I don't think so. I think it kind of all runs together.
Yeah.
Anymore, it really is. And are there people that are both sides of the spectrum? Sure, there are, but.
Yeah, no, but I get surprised all the time by people that are a lot older that are really engaged with the technology.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the lines are coming away. And they're disappearing more.
Yeah, I just bought a new TV the other night. It'd probably take me 3 or 4 months to figure out everything that it does, and I probably never will know everything that it does.
For sure.
Right? It's way smarter than I'll ever be.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of technology there that I'm going to try to figure out. But it's like everything is smart.
Everything is smart. All right, so we're going to wrap this segment up because I want to talk to Joe a little bit, a couple of career questions on our hot seat segment at the end. But just to wrap this up, Joe, you obviously have done a lot with Smart Cities research. You travel to conferences, you go all over. If someone out there wants to kind of keep up on this stuff and just learn about smart cities, what are some resources that they can use? Or I know that there's been reports out and different things.
Right.
What can you recommend?
There are. You'll see conferences and trade shows everywhere on the topic today, and I think again it's a topic that people it's becoming a little bit overused in terms of the conferences and trade shows. Everybody's trying to get into the space because it's a trendy space. But we're members of the Smart City Council. That's a sort of non-political entity headquartered in DC. Started years ago. They're sort of the standard bearers of a lot of things. They have their DC conferences coming up. But I always try to go back to the people that have been in it for the longest amount of time. Are the good resources for it.
And there's a study, wasn't there a study, or the hyper-connected?
Yeah, we've alluded to that a couple times. Pannoni, MasterCard, Accenture, Oracle, a number of big worldwide companies sponsored this study that eConsult did on the Smarter Cities 2025. That is on our website. You can go to our website.
We'll link to that for sure.
Yeah, innovation page, and there's 94 slides, a lot of information there about it. And then part 2 of that, which we're into right now, is building a hyper-connected. The title of it is Building a Hyper-Connected City, and that's part 2 of the study. And that's going to have some benchmarking tools in there for cities to understand. But I think the biggest thing that you'll get out of those 94 slides and that information, again, is that the understanding of what cities in the world are leading edge cities, what cities are transitioning, and what cities are beginners. But as I said earlier, every city will always be a beginner in technology because there's going to be new technologies.
Right.
Everybody's a beginner in autonomous vehicles, right?
Right.
Because it's we're not there yet. However, There are cities like Las Vegas, for example, that are way out in front of autonomous because they already have autonomous shuttles running down the strip.
Really?
In Las Vegas. So there are cities that have been early adopters and way out in front of the AV space.
Like there always will be, like
Right.
you said. All right, well, you can get some resources there. We'll link to those resources. Stick around now. I'm going to come back. We're here at Pannoni with Joe Viscuso. We're going to just pepper Joe on a couple last questions around his career. Stick with us. I hope you are enjoying this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, which is produced by the Engineering Management Institute. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here for more podcast episodes and for all of our Engineering Manager 80/20 Shorts videos that we publish weekly where we interview successful engineering managers. Now it's time to jump into our Civil Engineering Hot Seat segment. All right, we're back. Joe, you ready for the Civil Engineering Hot Seat?
Ready to go.
All right, let's do it. All right, first question. Are there any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a morning routine, lunchtime routine, something that you do that has contributed to your success?
The biggest thing that I try to do, and it's old school conventional, right, is that my traditional to-do list, right? I keep I constantly keep it updated because we move at such a fast pace.
Right.
We'll get done this interview. I'll go to my computer. There'll be 5 things on there that I didn't know about that just happened that are now going to have to be part of my to-do list.
Okay.
Right. So I make sure I immediately get things onto that list. I update it. I keep it in a Word document. I update it as frequently as I possibly can, just to remind myself of what's got to be the highest priority on my list. And then when I do get to my office in the morning, I try to jot down the 3 or 4 things that I want to accomplish that I got to get done
From that list.
Okay. That have to happen that day.
Okay.
Right. And I think what a lot of people, they get frustrated because, as I just said, the list just keeps growing, right? For all of us, because it's the world just moves so fast. The emails come, the phone calls come, the text messages
Right.
come, everything comes so fast that you have to, I think you will not, for me it's a feeling of a sense of accomplishment,
Right.
to know that the 3 or 4 things that I crossed 3 or 4 things off the list that day, and they had to get done that day. So I try to keep a running list of all things. Some things may be a month out, they may be 6 months out.
Right.
I'm getting ready to speak at a conference in New Orleans in October. That's been on my calendar for 9 months. Right. What do I have to do to prep for that? Well, the biggest thing I have to do is get my slide deck together. Right. And so that's.
It's not something you have to do today.
It's not something I have to do today, but I've been developing it over the last couple of months. The worst thing you can do is wait to the day before it's due.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And
Well, I think what's important of what Joe said there is having a to-do list is a good thing, but going through it each day and prioritizing it is also an important thing, because I think, like you said, checking things off, especially as engineers, as kind of analytical thinkers, checking things off does make us feel good, but we could be checking off the wrong things too, right? And not focusing on the big things. So it's good to hear that. All right, next question. What's one book that you might recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book of any kind that has been very helpful for you in your career or your professional development?
Well, I'll say a genre, right?
Okay.
Right. Again, because I do love the technology and how things are changing. I think anything from Steve Jobs, right?
Okay.
Because the guy was a forward thinker.
Yeah.
He was an innovator. But also, if you look at his business acumen and his thought process, so books about him. Quotes from him. I'll quote him a lot.
Okay.
Even here at Pannoni.
Right.
With things that I put out, because it's so. I just think that anything. To me, he was the godfather of the innovator. Obviously we've been innovating for years.
Right.
But it's sort of. What's the one thing you point to that accelerated it, poured the gas on the fire,
right?
And it really was the iPhone and all the technology around it that just sped it up, to that exponential.
No, I like that, because like we said earlier, if you're thinking about innovating as a company, it's nice to have things like that where you can say, what would Steve Jobs have done here?
Right.
What would he be thinking?
Right.
What would Apple have done here?
Right.
Something like that, to give a frame of reference to your leadership, right? And the people around you, to
Right.
keep them going.
And to the point where, again, because he's current, because everybody knows who he is, it resonates with everybody in the firm, regardless of age.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So it resonates with everybody.
Yeah, he's an inspiring guy.
Right.
Right.
But I think forget the innovation stuff. His thoughts on business and the growth of a business and what you have to pay attention to.
Right.
Even those kind of things are. I think people give him credit for the and look, he failed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you really know his history, he failed. Right. But he got back up on the horse in a big way. But if you look at some of his early, the things that he did early in his career, he was a complete failure.
Yeah.
Right. And could have thrown in the towel. A lot of people would have thrown in the towel.
No, the reason I asked that question is because, you can find information online easily around Steve Jobs and his philosophy, and it's out there and available, and I think hopefully some of the listeners will do that, and it can have an impact on them. All right, 2 more questions. You've had, I'm sure, several managers throughout your career that you've worked for. You don't have to name names, or you can, but if you had to remember one of your favorite, a couple of your favorite managers, what was it that made you remember them? What did they do that was special?
I'm a people person, right? So I think that managers that pay attention to their people. I mean, what's the biggest asset at a Pannoni? It's the 1,200 people that work here, right? That's our biggest asset, and I think you have to pay attention to that asset. And I think that the managers that made me feel like I was part of the process, that I was important. When I was a junior engineer, when I was a project manager, that took the time to mentor me.
Right.
That's what resonated. And it can, there's obviously been quite a few of them.
Sure.
Over my. I don't have the interesting thing about my career. It's not like I've my movement from firm to firm. I've only been with it was a starting out and then having my own firm, and then that firm merged with a firm, and that firm got sold to a firm. So really, most of my career was really with one firm, being in that, and then the movement here to Pannoni. But I think of those managers that paid attention to the asset.
That's great.
And the asset is the people.
That's great.
Right?
All right, last question, Joe. You get into an elevator with a young, up-and-coming civil engineering professional. You have about 30 seconds with him or her to give them some kind of career advice. What do you tell them?
I go back to what I said before. That pay attention to the innovation. A project will always be a project. At the end of the year, that's what an engineer does, right? In terms of providing good advice to the client based on the best information that we have available to us. But again, you really have to be. You're going to have to be current in the technology because it's just changing so fast. I'll leave you with my, and Katie knows this. One of my favorite analogies around the company is engineers like to say we block and tackle. We're engineers and we block and tackle. That's what engineers do, right? And that's true. That's the core of the onion, right? But if you watch, I'm a big football fan. Mm-hmm. If you watch football, on the field they're blocking and tackling. On the sidelines, what are they doing? Right? It's all data analytics with Microsoft Surface computers. Yeah,
they're all looking at the tablets.
All the tendencies. If we do this, they're going to do this. This is what this is telling us. If I took away the Microsoft Surface computers from, I'm an Eagles fan. If I took it away from, and tonight I think they're our first preseason game playing the Titans. If I took it away from the Titans and only the Eagles had the computers, what would the results of that game be?
For sure.
Right? Doesn't matter how on the field they're blocking and tackling. It's the technology that's getting you there today that is totally different. So I think and a good thing is, the young engineers I think seem to get that. And as I said before, they're going to gravitate to the firms that understand the importance of that technology.
That's great, and it's funny because I tell my kids a lot if we're watching sports and let's say their team's losing at halftime by a number of points. I'll say, listen, they're still in the game because what they're doing right now is they're in the locker room looking at film.
Yeah.
And they're making adjustments.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes in your career. If your career hasn't gone well the first few years, make sure you keep a beat on what's working and what's not working, and make adjustments.
Right.
Maybe by learning an innovative technology or becoming an expert in smart cities, it's going to give you a tool that can propel you in your career, right? There's tons of data available to us today. Like Joe said, you can use it to your advantage. Your firm can use it to your advantage because if you're not, you can bet that someone else is.
That's exactly right.
Right?
That's exactly right.
All right, so Joe Viscuso, Pannoni. Joe, thanks for spending some time with us on the Civil Engineering Podcast. We're going to link to all the resources that Joe mentioned so you can start to look and learn about smart cities. And Joe, thanks again.
Pleasure, Anthony. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast on YouTube, produced by the Engineering Management Institute. We're always looking for new ways to help engineers become effective managers and leaders. You can view all of our content on our website at engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here for our weekly videos. Until next time, please continue to engineer your own success.